It's amazing what a little hope can do. Hope can provide a purpose, and having a purpose can change the course of one's life, or the course of a country. The story of the CCC is one of hope and purpose, and it starts with a brand new president taking over during some of the hardest days in American history. Franklin D. Roosevelt was sworn into office in March of 1933. The economic fabric of the United States was unraveling. Some 25% were unemployed. Millions were out of work. Hope was in short supply. In his inaugural address, he vowed to put people to work. FDR sought innovative solutions to alleviate the widespread unemployment and poverty that gripped the nation. One such visionary initiative, as part of the New Deal, was the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, an ambitious program that not only provided employment, but also left an enduring mark on the nation's landscapes. A few weeks later, he signed into law the Emergency Conservation Work Act, creating the Civilian Conservation Corps.
Hobart Parish was from a small town in West Tennessee, Buena Vista, which means beautiful view. Buena Vista is located in Carroll County. Parish played with the granddaughter of the local magistrate of the area. The magistrate was given the duty of selecting boys to go in the CCC. He had been telling Hobart that he was too young to enlist. He had said something about the CCCs, but Hobart had no idea what it was. At that time most roads were bad, car tires had a habit of going flat. So far Hobart had never seen a CCC camp. The magistrate was carrying a group of 9 boys, his quota, to enlist and invited Parish to come along. The enlistment point for several counties was Bethel College, located in McKenzie, Tennessee. Parish would sit under a tree and read a book, watch the birds and people while he waited for the other boys to be examined. It was hot and there was no air conditioning back then. The magistrate came out and asked Parish if he would like to go into the CCCs. One of the boys had failed the exam. Hobart said the magistrate had been telling him he was too young, but the magistrate said they are going to take care of that. Hobart asked what about my mother and he said I will take care of that. Parish went into the gym for the first examination in his life and also learned later that his birthday year had been changed. He was actually 16 but the papers showed 17. Many years later Hobart had quite a time getting his real age straightened out. Hobart Parish enlisted on July 5 of 1934 to be part of the Civilian Conservation Corps. Hobart said after passing the exam he went with the other 8 boys to the McKenzie depot and waited for the train to whisk them away, said he went to sleep on the plank that covered the top of 2 benches backed up together. They boarded the train and arrived in Clarksville, Tennessee about 2 a.m. in the morning. He said he thought if the world was as big the other direction as it was this way, then the world had to be a very big place. The following is an audio interview recording of Hobart Parish as he tells of his time spent in the Civilian Conservation Corps. The recording was later archived at the Tennessee State Library and Archive in Nashville, to be forevermore preserved as part of Tennessee's history and the history of one man's experience in the Civilian Conservation Corps.
So Bethel was the recruiting point.
That was where they went to, where I went to, and where they went to at that time. They brought them from other places into Bethel and McKenzie, and give them an examination. Then they could ship them by rail from there to wherever they were going. And I had said something to him about getting in the CCCs. He said I wasn't old enough, which I wasn't, and but it still did keep me from asking. And he'd say, "I told you you wasn't old enough."
How old did you have to be?
You had to be 17.
Mm-hmm.
At one time, you had to be 18, but a little later on, it was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know when they changed it exactly, but I went with him with the bunch he carried down. He carried 9 boys beside me, and he carried me so I could ride back with him. He told me that on Saturday he wanted me to go with him because he wanted somebody that could change a tire and patch up interview and all that. And not that I was good at that, but I could do it. And other things that might go wrong, because he, as I say, I don't know how old he was, but I would guess he was 55, 60 anyway. And so I went with him, and I was outside of the Bethel College gymnasium. That's where they were doing the examination. He came out. He said, "You sure you want to go in the CCCs?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'd like to, but you told me I wasn't old enough." And he said, "Well, I can take care of that." No, I didn't know what he said. He said, "They said they'd take care of that." And I didn't know how they was going to take care of it at that time. In fact, I didn't know them much later that they made me a year older. And my birthday, instead of being September the 28th, 1917, was September the 28th, 1916. But anyway, that's the way I got in. And then when I looked up at him, I said, "Well, what about my mother?" He said, "I'll make it okay with her." And, you know, you trusted people to do just what they tell you, and he would. And most people would then that I had any contact with. So I ended up coming to, getting to the railroad station, and we caught the train and went to Clarksville, Tennessee, and that's where I was in camp.
I assume that the camps were not integrated at that time. Did you know of any black CCC camps, or were there blacks in your camp in Clarksville?
No, we didn't have any there. We had some Italians that was almost black.
They came from all over?
They came from all over, Detroit, New York, everywhere.
So you had out-of-state young men?
Out-of-state, yeah.
Huh.
They were at Dixon, Montgomery Bell Park. The first camp that was there was black. And then later on, they moved out and went to Centerville, I believe, or somewhere down in that area to another camp. It's a black camp. And I'm not sure where they went to. And then the camp at Clarksville, moved down there. And they were white. So that part of that park was built with blacks and part of it was built by whites.
That's Cumberland?
Montgomery Bell.
Oh, Montgomery Bell, I see.
Yeah, they built Montgomery Bell. And in fact, Montgomery Bell was a national park to start with. And then it was the state, they transferred over to the state. And I'm guessing at this, I think that the reason why the camps, some of them were national, was because they couldn't work for a state, and they had to change the law a little bit in order to do things for the state. Now, they would let us go do things, but I mean, to turn over land and all that to the state, and a lot of times let the state buy that. They buy the land, and then the CC boys would work on it. And of course, there's about something like 20 camps, 20 parks in Tennessee that CC's worked on. Which is, that's from none. That's pretty good.
Right. CCC had a lot to do with the Tennessee State Park system.
Right, and also Smoky Mountains. They had something like 16. Well, I read something the other day that said there was 20 camps in the Smokies, but I had always heard there was 16. So I don't know how many was in there between North Carolina and Tennessee. But I always heard 16 till I read, and they said there was 20. So maybe there was 20, I don't know. And it might have been that there were 20 camps, but not 20 all at one time.
Mr. Parish, is there anything else that you'd like to point out or mention connected with CCC, or any final thoughts you have on your experiences?
Well, you know, I can't remember a time that we had any of our CC boys put in jail for doing something that they shouldn't have been doing, like they are now, as far as that they're not in the CCC. Mm-hmm. They had strict rulings about this, that, and the other. I'm not saying they didn't drink. I'm saying they didn't get caught. Mm-hmm. And we had one officer around Clarksville that especially tried hard. He wanted to catch some CC boys that he could put in jail. And he paraded, patrolled the road that came to the camp and everything. We all knew him. I don't know what his name was now. He was doing his job.
He was a sheriff, or?
He was a deputy, I believe, deputy sheriff, or a Clarksville policeman. I'm not sure. He was an officer anyway. He had the power to do it. And there was a bootleg place out going towards Dixon. And a lot of the boys got their whiskey out there, and he figured he'd catch them drinking, or he'd catch them with it, but he didn't have no luck.
So there's pretty good discipline in the camps.
Yeah, discipline.
You saw.
If you had a boy, say, that didn't take baths, they would put up with it for a little while, and the first thing you know, a bunch of them would get together and they'd take him to the shower, and they took one of these big brushes and soap, and they gave him a washing. And when he got through, he was red, but he was also taking a shower from then on. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of things like that they did to the ones that did something to somebody else, or was actually causing others to be unhappy about being around them.
Right, and they took care of things themselves.
Yeah, they took care of one another. Mm-hmm. And nearly all of them had, if they went to town, they had a buddy with them, or two buddies, or something like that. So it wasn't like you was going to town by yourself. And when I went to church, man, one boy used to go to churches all the time. We went to every church in Clarksville, I think, on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And we got to wondering, well, what's the difference? Why are you going to be a Baptist? Why do you want to be a Methodist? All of them trying to go to the same place.
What was in the Clarksville community, what was the attitude of people towards the CCC? How were you all regarded by the local populace?
I think at first they were a little bit, if I understand it, I wasn't there at first. I think they were a little bit taken aback by the CCs being there, but later on they got to where they treated them just like as their own boys, you might say. Mm-hmm. In fact, sometimes the person out at the farm that we was working there, she'd come out and tell us, "Don't bring no lunch tomorrow. I'm going to have lunch for you." Mm. And she'd cook a pretty good lunch, you know. And of course, we were just on the survey crew. Much of the time, there were just two of us, and sometimes three, but most of the time it was just two. And that was up until we switched from forestry to Forest Service to Soil Conservation Service. And when I say switch, they started, at first it was Forest Service, and then they established Soil Conservation Service, and so we ended up being a Soil Conservation Service camp. And that's where the number of that camp was SCS 8 when it was under Soil Conservation Service. When it was under the Forest Service, it was P63. And each type of work that you did, they had a different type numbered camp for that, so they could tell what kind of work. Mm-hmm. So that the guys that was in Washington could, and other places could say, well, that's a Forest Service camp, or that's a soil conservation camp, or that camp's at the Department of Interior, or they are doing some kind of work that would, like irrigation.
Before we start talking about the CCC itself, I wanted to ask you what your recollection of the, or awareness of the Depression was. What did you think was going on? What had you heard about the Depression or the New Deal or any of those things?
That's the only thing. When I did get hold of a paper, you might see pictures of someplace like New York or Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., or someplace like that, with people that were going hungry and were in soup lines. And not only that, but they'd have some reading in there about it, too. But actually, I don't think I read much about it because, to me, well, yeah, getting soup, so that sounds good. And the people that lived in our areas, although you couldn't get any money much for your cotton, you couldn't get any money much for your sweet potatoes, you couldn't sell your watermelons, but you raised your own food. That's the only thing you had to get was salt, black pepper, and a few things like that, and you got them from a wagon that came around through the country.
Peddler. A peddler.
Yeah, peddling wagon, what you call it.
Rolling store, I've heard it called.
Yeah. We called them peddling wagons. And they'd have several different things on there that you might buy, like a toothbrush or toothpaste. They wouldn't put with a lot of things. It wasn't like going into at Woolworth.
Right.
In fact, they didn't have Woolworth then, I don't think. They might have had it in some town, but I don't remember one around close to us. And but as far as noticing the real problems that they were having, where they couldn't get a job and didn't have enough to eat, and was riding the trains as hobos, I didn't think too much about that, other than the fact that that's natural. If a hobo got off and wanted something to eat, why, somebody would maybe give him some. And but as far as having effects like it had on the towns, living in the country, you didn't. It did make a difference about getting money, because you couldn't sell a lot of stuff that you usually sold. But usually your sweet potatoes would finally go, and most of the time you got rid of the cotton. And we didn't sell corn, and we did sell sorghum, but most of what we sold around there. And sorghum wasn't, the price of sorghum wasn't very high for a gallon of sorghum, but it was still money. You could buy stuff a lot cheaper. And
nobody was going hungry.
Nobody was going hungry that I knew of. And that, I guess being young, it didn't hit me very hard.
Being in the country, too.
Yeah.
That made a difference, being in the country.
Yeah. It did make a
Raised
difference.
so much for you.
Yes.
Cans and
Tell us a little bit about your main camp in Clarksville, the physical layout, and what they were constructed of. And so
Well, this camp in Clarksville, Tennessee, was just outside of the city limits at that time. Now it's inside the city limits, if it was there. But of course, there's houses all over the area where the camp was, and we could walk to town very quickly. We could go to the movies. We could go to, I went to high school, to Clarksville High School, went at night. You had to go on your own time. But they would give you that time off and let you do something else when you wasn't actually, going to school. So I went to Clarksville High School and walked, and believe there's one other boy went with me. I can't remember who he was. And they had night school. They not only had it just for us, but they had it for the Clarksville kids too. And we went and just like they did, and got our education at night. And they were also teaching kids that came in from maybe in the country or from there in town.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some that ended up going to Austin P on a similar arrangement. I did not do that. Probably should have, but I didn't. But one thing, I was usually busy taking some kind of a course that was being given at the camp. Like the engineer there would teach a class, the soil conservation would teach a class. The mechanic would teach mechanics, and the blacksmith would teach blacksmithing, and forester would teach a class in forestry. A lot of that I didn't remember because I was mainly thinking about the engineering class because I was working for him, and he told us what to do and showed us how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened to not only us, but the crews. Their foreman and the leader and assistant leader that probably had been there long enough to already learn, would show them how to do the things they needed to do, like fencing or telephone lines or roads or trying to get the land back to where it wasn't eroded and would grow grass anyway, and also try to stop the erosion. And they built dams to do that. And in some areas they took did terracing, taught the farm into strip cropping, other things that would hold erosion, set trees, planted many trees. One of those pictures I show you, that I don't know if you read that or not, that sign, Studebaker, that's a tree that was set to spell the word Studebaker. But they did that in order to get that to work on that farm and to stop the erosion.
Mm-hmm. I think the idea of putting unemployed people to work on useful projects for the public good was a great idea.
Yeah.
And it actually worked with CCC.
So that was the beginning of what you call trickle down.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think that Reagan started that, but it really was started by the CCC, the way they handled it, because that money that went home could be spent by whoever happened to be family, or if it was somebody that had been adopted or what have you, his family could spend it, and it would help the towns that it went to. Like, I had one guy that told me it was operating a butcher shop. He said if it hadn't been for the CCC, he'd had to close his butcher shop. And I don't know how many different types of businesses I've heard that about. So by that money going to those places, it helped not only the CC family, but it helped the ones that was running those butcher shops. It helped the other people around there that bought their groceries or bought their, at that time, as I said, they had butcher shop, bought their meat from a butcher shop. And I think that if people read a lot about CCC, they would probably go along with the fact that it did do a lot for the country. Not only did it do a lot for the boys that was in those camps, and a lot of them learned a trade, and a lot of them got a chance to do things. A lot of them that played music, they could play music and have boys listen at them because there wasn't a lot to do at those camps. We had a pool table, we had a ping pong table, and we had basketball goals inside a building that could be played at night. But mainly, at night, what you did, you had to do it inside one of the places where you had some lights, where you didn't have a place outside to go. And so the boys got together, and a lot of them did things that had nothing to do with the CCC, but it helped them later on.
Right. We've got a nice picture of a CCC camp band, just stringing guitars, spoons, harmonica. I think they were called the Tennessee Playboys, but it was a pretty crackerjack looking band. It's a nice photograph anyway, and it was one of the...
Yeah, there was, not only that, there was some comedians in there too, that we got around, you got to talking, and they keep you laughing all the time. And it wasn't it was just very natural. It's natural. And it's I want to tell you this. When we were down on the Mississippi River doing the flood control work, we had one boy that got drowned. That's the only one that I know of that was in the camp that I was in during those 5 years that we lost from an accident.
What attracted you to want to be in the CCC? You said you had a desire to join.
Well, one thing that I had heard was you had a chance of getting an education in CCCs. You had a chance of making a little money, and you had a chance of learning a trade. And it was kind of hard to go to college, so that was one of the attractions to me in the CCC, was that I'm going to get that same what I need to be able to take care of myself as a worker by going to CCCs and taking all the different trades that they have as a boy. And then, if I do want to go to college, I'll be saving some money and I can go.
Good plan.
Because I didn't use, they gave you $5, and the rest of it they sent home. And then when you got to be an assistant leader, they gave you $11, and the $25 went home. And I knew that even though she could have used it if she wanted to or needed to, I knew my mother was keeping it for me to use for that. And so that's why I guess wanted in there. And then you heard a lot about it, about the things they did, like playing ball, like music and other things, because you had all kind of boys in the CCC.
Did you all have any interactions with TVA or WPA or any of those other?
Well, TVA had camps that worked for them. TVA had something like 40 camps, I think it was. So, like Pickwick, the Pickwick block, the Pickwick Park, it was built by the CC boys. And there was a CC camp there, and it was operated by the TVA. There was a camp at Parish, Tennessee, that was operated by the TVA because it was close to the Tennessee River and did work for TVA. And they did work TVA needed done, rather than work at the Soil Conservation Service or and the head of it was called TVA number so-and-so, but it had an Army number also. And just like Clarksville had SCS 8, the Army number was 1474. And when it moved to Murfreesboro, it ended up being the same numbered camp, both ways because that's the type of work he was going to do. But if you moved in from a soil conservation camp to a forestry camp, they'd change the number to a forestry number. And of course, TVA, as I said, had about 40 camps. When you take it all the way up through Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, up into the mountains, there could be a lot of camps, I think, something like that. They had one at Garce Dam, and a lot of places up in that area up in there that was TVA camps. I don't have a thing. I don't think it shows that with me because I lost my book somehow or other and I'm moving around.
So you stayed in CCC for 5 years. Was that pretty typical? Did boys stick around that long, or usually move in and out?
They usually, when you enlisted, you were supposed to stay 6 months. A lot of them stayed there 6 months. But after you had been in there 2 years, they discharged you. But because I was doing the type of work I was doing, I suppose, well, they kept me. And I also ended up getting what they call a camp assistant, which was a civil service job while I was in there. And then I was, you might say, in the CCCs, but I stayed at home and worked just like the foreman and the engineer and the others did. Now, a lot of boys, shall I name him? Like Frank Sinatra, went over the hill. That's what we called it. They stayed a while and it didn't hit them. And they just left. Of course, I guess he did the best thing to do was leave because he ended up being a pretty good singer.
Yeah.